Shalom, guys. Welcome back to another episode here at Yeshav Ministries with Casa de Israel. Yarah. Thank you for being there. Like I always tell you, if you like the content that we have on our channel,
Smash that like button and subscribe.
comments, concerns, put them in the comment section down below. So, this week's Torah portion is a Torah portion Behar. It starts in Leviticus chapter 25. It's 25. It's only one chapter. Well, it gets to chapter 26. Verse 2, but mainly one chapter. It's a very important chapter. It is highlighting one of the most important aspects of Israel's conquering the land, which was to let the land rest, right? And so we're going to talk about why they should have let the land rest, why was that so important, and why is it highlighted in this full chapter of the book of Leviticus or Vayikra. So before we get started, let's do a Torah blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Hamorah, Baruch Adonai Hamorah, Leolam Ma'eh, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Melech HaOlam, Asher Bahar Banu Mikol Hamim, Venatan Lanu, Et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Bless Adonai who is blessed, bless Adonai who is blessed now and forever. Blessed are you, Adonai, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and has given us a Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives the Torah. Amen. So like I said, this week's Torah portion is Behar. It starts in Leviticus chapter 25. Now, the Torah portion, or the prophet's portion, it's Jeremiah chapter 32, verses 6 through 27, and the Brit Hadashah is Luke chapter 4, verses 16 through 21. So, this week's Torah portion starts off with the commandment of the Israelite farmer to let the land rest, remainly follow every seventh year. This is the sabbatical or the Shemitah year. The inhabitants of the land were permitted to glean whatever the farmland produced naturally, okay? In addition, the people were told to glean, in addition, the people were told to count 7 cycles of 7 years, which was a total of 49 years, and to mark the arrival of the 50th year with the blast of the shofar on the Day of Atonement, which was Yom Kippur. The 50th year, which would be a time of Jubilee or Yovel, a year of release for the land and all inhabitants. All slaves would be set free, all debts will be canceled, and the stewardship of the land will revert to the original tithe holder. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go to Leviticus chapter 25 first, and we'll go on from there. So it says, Ha'eretz Shabbat lechava shesh shani titzra zadecha wa shesh shanim titzmor mecha wa atzafehta et tabu ata. And in English, it says the following. The Lord then spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I shall give you, then the land shall have a Shabbat to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and the 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, gather in the crops. But during the 7th year, the land shall have a Shabbat rest, the Shabbat to the Lord. You shall not sow your field, nor prune your vineyards. Your harvest after growth shall not reap. Your grapes of untrimmed vines you shall not gather. The land shall have a sabbatical year. All of you shall have the Shabbat product of the land for food, for yourselves, your male and your female slaves, your hired men, and your foreign residents, those who live as aliens with you. Even your cattle and the animals that are in your land shall have all its crops to eat. You are also to count of 7 Shabbats of a year for yourself, 7 times 7 years, so that you have the time of the 7th Shabbat of years, namely for 49 years. You shall then sound a ram's horn abroad on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement, you shall sound a horn all through the land. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year and proclaim a release through the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his own property. Each of you shall return to his family. You shall have the 50th year as a jubilee. You shall not sow nor reap its aftergrowth, nor gather in from its untrimmed vines. For it is its jubilee. It shall be holy to you, and you shall eat its crops out of the field. On this year of the jubilee, each of you shall return to his own property. If you make a sale, moreover, to your friend, or buy from your friend's hand, you shall not wrong one another. Corresponding to the number of years after the jubilee, you shall buy from your friend. He is to sell to you according to the number of years of crops. In portion to the extent of years, you shall increase its price, and its proportion to the fewness of years, you shall diminish its price. For it is a number of crops he is selling to you. So you shall not wrong one another, but you shall fear your God, for I am the Lord your God. You shall thus observe my statutes and my command, and keep my judgments, so as to carry them out, that you may live securely on the land. The land will yield its produce, so that you can eat your fill and live securely on it. But if you say, what are we going to eat on the 7th year if we do not sow or gather in our crops? Then I will so order my blessing for you in the 6th year, that it will bring forth the crop for 3 years. When you are sowing the 8th year, you can still eat all things from the crop, eating the old until the 9th year, when this crop comes in. Okay, so now we'll go into the redemption law, which it will let you know how would you redeem the land which you sold, and for what reason would you sell them, or for what reason you will enslave yourself. Remember, the Bible does not necessarily say that you could be a slave, but there is clause to say that you can, to pay a debt, work to pay off that debt, which in the Bible is categorized as slave, but in a way it's a servant. You become a servant to pay off that debt that you cannot pay. We're gonna read, like I always show you guys, from the Sundervan Illustrated Bible for the book of Leviticus. Now, verse 10 says to proclaim liberty. The Hebrew word for liberty here is the roar. It is related to the Akkadian word anduraru, which refers to various kinds of release, including remission of commercial debts and manumission of private slaves, especially near the beginning of their reigns. Several Mesopotamian kings proclaimed release similar to the biblical Jubilee, in that they provided relief for debtors and return of land and persons pledged, sold, or enslaved in direct consequences of debt. The purpose of such legislation was to restore some economic and social equilibrium. Remember, there's something that we're going to consistently study and review, because remember, we review the Torah portions, we read them, because we do forget. And so it's good to refresh our memories and review. So remember, Israel is an agrarian society. And so they depend on the land producing. And it's something that I have repeated to my youth, so you should know. But they depend on the land to produce. They depend on the rain, they depend on the sun, they depend on all these natural elements to produce so they can survive. It's not like in our time today where we have a lot of things very easily to our access, fast food restaurants and all those things. No, they had to work hard to produce, and they had to depend on God to bring forth that fruit based on the hard work that they put onto the land and how they took care of the land. And an element that is very important that God is trying to give to Israel is you and the land work as a team, right? So you yourself work the land, you yourself work to produce crops, but there is a time where the land itself needs to rest. And this is where you enjoy the produce that the land gives based on that work that you put in, obviously, and you rest and enjoy the crops, plus the land rests so that it can rest from all the work that you put into the land. I think that is like the most basic way to explain it. But understanding that other nations don't understand this, right? They consistently might oppress the land, or they might oppress their families and their people by doing idolatrous worship or sacrificing their children, all these things for the benefit or for the desire for God to provide for them in their agricultural societies. And so God is helping Israel understand what is the balance. How do you bring balance naturally for the land to provide crops? Obviously, there is land that it is given to the people, and land that is that it needs to be maintained. Okay, so the main unique feature of the Israelite Jubilee release was that its regular reoccurrence, which gave it a predictability and an independence from the arbitrary will of an absolute human ruler. Also, whereas exceptions to release in Mesopotamia could be specified by royal edicts or by contracts. The Israelite Jubilee was designed to benefit all Israelites, and it gives you parentheses, but not the non-Israelites, is giving a responsibility to the people so that they can fulfill this command themselves and be part of the cycle and not have to solely become dependent on sacrifices and offerings. For this, you are responsible for maintaining the land and letting the land rest at the same time also. It says, verse 10 also explains how you will give back to the family property and to his own clan, right? So the basic Israelite economic system was the concept that God was the ultimate owner of all the land and granted to each family its inalienable right to use, but not to permanently sell a piece of agricultural real estate. Some Ugaritic real estate documents show similar concern for permanence of land grants. In Egypt, the pharaoh, who was regarded as divine, was the overall owner of the land and assigned it to his subject. Whatever this situation for commoners may have been in actual practice, and Egyptian treaties on kingship recognizes the idea of free people with use of their own land. Such people were more likely to be contented, unified, and loyal than if their situation was otherwise. Unlike Israel and Egypt, Mesopotamia lacked unified system for the land ownership. If an Israelite farmer fell on hard times and had to sell or release temporarily in use of his land, he would have no way to support himself and could be forced into slavery along with his family members, and whether by selling himself and them or by being seized or collateral for a debt in default. Other ancient Near Eastern could fall into slavery for similar reasons, and also through defeat in warfare. Now, this is the concept of this Israelite having to put himself in a position to be a slave because he is fallen in debt. So how do you repay the debt? Well, you lease your land, because remember, God makes a very important point in chapter 25, where he explains that the land is his, right? So the land is not the Israelites per se. Is a promise to the Israelite people and to Abraham, but the land itself is God's, and God is giving it to Israel for them to maintain the land. But they have no authority to sell or give away anything, right? So they're just responsible for maintaining the land so the land can produce fruit, and they maintain that cycle the same way that Adam was called to maintain the garden and obey God's command, which is the important aspect of this Torah portion. Again, the cycle continues with Israel depending on the obedience of Adonai's word so that they can have the food that they need and the nourishment for their family, and for them to maintain themselves in the land. They will have to obey Adonai's law, and they have to be fair with one another in a case of debt, when it came to them having to sell their land or lease their land to another Israelite. And that Israelite that was leasing that land to help them pay off that debt cannot oppress that Israelite, because they're trying to bring that balance back. And so the community was supposed to help one another maintain the structure and the balance, so that way nobody was completely impoverished. And so after a certain amount of time, designated permanently, they will be released of their debts, or if they were able to pay their debt, they will pay that debt and move on, and that land will be given back to them. Okay, so that is what Adonai is explaining now, right? So that land that was leased to that specific person, they were supposed to let that land rest. And if it was leased due to debt, then at the 50th year, they will have remission, and they will give that land back to the original owner that leased it. Okay, so that is one of the most important aspects of this Torah portion, mainly. Also, I want to point out something very important, very interesting, and then I'll let you guys be. From here, it says, I remember verse 6, it says, your harvest aftergrowth shall not reap, and your grapes of untrimmed vines you shall not gather. The land shall have a sabbatical year. So the word here for untrimmed vines is Nazir, right? Devoted, consecrated, right? Nazareo, Nazareus. So this is a term that you can see in verse 6, verse 18, when it comes to the Nazarite vow, and they are, called to not drink wine, let their hair grow, and this is a vow that they can do, and it is interesting that it connects this word Nazir to that consecration, that separation, that the devoutness is also connected to prince, right? And it's interesting that they call Yeshua, he's a Nazir, or he's from Nazareth as well. And so he was separated, consecrated. So we're going to read chapter 4, verses 16 and on, but we're going to read from 14, right? So Yeshua has been tempted in the desert, right? So Yeshua goes to the desert, he's tempted. And remember, he has been tempted by the Satan, and he is able to survive this test. And so now he goes, it says, Yeshua, Jesus, returned to Galilee in the power of the Holy Spirit, and news about him spread through all the surrounding districts. And he began teaching in their synagogues and was praised by all. He came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as was his custom, and he entered into the synagogue, right? Very, very important. Entered the synagogue on Shabbat, right? And stood up to read. Now, they have the seat of Moses, or they had this moment where they read straight from the scroll from the Torah, and it says in the book of the prophet was handed to him, which is the Haftorah. So we read the Torah portion, Haftorah, and we have added the Brit Chadashah portion. And he opened the book and found the place where it was written. And he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, and he has sent me to proclaim the release, which is deror, or it can be connected to deror, or in the Greek it's aphesis, right? Let's see, aphesis, right? Pardon, forgiveness, letting go, dismissal, right? It says, to release to the captives and recovery of the sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord, which is the Jubilee, the release. And so something that we're going to have to understand that we don't know yet, but as you read on to the book of Joshua and so on, and the prophets, one of the biggest things that Israel didn't do, which got them casted out to the exile in Babylon, was that they never fulfilled chapter 25, which they never let the land rest. And they never let that land rest, which then brought curse on them. They also obviously went into idolatry, and they worshipped other gods. They assimilated with other nations. And so they never understood the concept and the balance that God was trying to bring into the people, and eventually through Israel, the balance that he was trying to bring to the world, to bring back the Garden of Eden. And so reading from Isaiah, Yeshua says that he has been sent to proclaim the release, to let the captives be free, to recover the sight of the blind, and to free the oppressed. The same way that, Adonai did through Moses when they exited Egypt. Yeshua himself came to proclaim the same release, same freedom of oppression. And he has fulfilled that with obedience, separation, right? Nazir, he separated himself, he consecrated himself. Just like that vineyard was supposed to be separated and consecrated, we're called also to separate ourselves and consecrate ourselves the same way that Yeshua himself separated himself and consecrated ourselves and himself, and he did it in obedience to his Father, which is a very simple concept to explain, well, or not, but is something that we should be able to understand, but we never get the full grasp of it because we get distracted in fulfilling our wills or fulfilling our own ideas to fulfill God's will. And in reality, we're able to enjoy that which Adonai has provided for us. So let's obey, let's be consistent, and so I hope that you guys have a wonderful Shabbat. That's all I got for this week, the Jubilee and the Shemitah. Okay, so read up, answer the questions. I'll be putting some in the description with answers for the cheaters, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Have a great week. Shavuot Tov and Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.